So if you're like a lot of my friends who've come to me, sending me messages, texting me saying, hey, Kyle, what's going on with these polls? I'm freaking out. What's going on? And if you're a Trump supporter and you're worried about all this and you want to know some information about these polls and what you can believe and what you can't believe, well, this video is for you. I'm going to go through all of that, explain to you. And if you're freaking out, this will make you feel a lot better. Hello, my name is Kyle and welcome to my channel, and this is The Conservative Take. Sometimes I do a video like this because I want people to understand a little bit about the polling nature of culture, because what happens is sometimes polls come out, people see the readout and they get an interpretation of what they think they're seeing and automatically assume and then get down on themselves. They get down on their candidate and they don't want to participate. And what Trump calls these things suppression polls, I totally agree with that. In 2016, we saw this a bunch. And I want to say right now that the polling data right now is not as bad as it seems for Trump. Now, I will say this is not going to be a prediction video, but it will be one that after you watch it, you can be like, oh, okay, I understand now. Trump's got a really good shot of being reelected. In fact, I think he's got a better than 50% chance. Now you might say, well, Kyle, that's not a good deal because he won by so much in 2016. Well, right now we're in the middle of the summer and things haven't really panned out yet. We're in a situation with a pandemic and riots and the country's having unrest. And so that's part of a lot of this. But also the polling just is not accurate when you look at who they're targeting. I'm going to explain that. I'm going to do a situation where I'm going to talk about polling 101. I'm going to talk about the aggregate polls from the Real Clear Politics. And then I'm going to tell you what the polling data is not telling you. There's about 7 or 8 things that are in polls and around polling that just isn't being told to you by the media. If you were told that, you would say, okay, I can interpret this way. And lastly, I'm going to go over an election map of the 4 of the 5 states, battleground states, that Trump needs to win and what he needs to do to win each of them. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Bill Mitchell as well as Red Eagle Politics, where I'm getting this information from. I will leave links to those 2 bloggers below. So again, this is not going to be a prediction video. I'm not going to say Trump's definitely going to win. I may do that in the future. I will say this though, in 2016, the day of the election, I did a video where I predicted Trump would win by over 300 electoral college votes. I even had him winning Pennsylvania and Michigan, and I knew that for reasons in that video. If you want to know what I said in that video, the quality is really, really bad. It's one of my first videos. It's before the channel even really was doing anything. I'll leave a link in my membership page, or you can go to my Discord server, log in there, and it'll be a link in there as well. Check that out. So what is polling when it comes to elections? Simply put, pollsters want to know who's going to vote for whom, and they break it out by category. That's called a sample. So they have a collection of 100 people. They feel that if 51% of the country is white, they're going to try and sample 51 white Americans. And of that, they're going to be half of those are going to be female, and a certain portion of those are going to be Republican, a certain portion of those are going to be Democrat, and so forth. So they try and get that as much as possible. They poll them, and then they can get a sample of what they feel people are going to vote when it comes to the bigger portion of the country. You may have heard the term bellwether. This is sort of what that means. It means it's an area that, demographically speaking, mirrors the US. But these pollsters all have a bias, and the bias is built into their assumptions on what that bellwether or what that demographic or what that sample is going to look like. So what their assumption is on that sample of who is going to turn out on election day, that is where they get the numbers wrong. And the reason why it was so wrong in 2016 was because they couldn't sample the Trump voter, because they didn't trust the pollsters, or they couldn't be contacted via cell phone, or they weren't answering the phone, or in the primaries, they refused to answer exit polls, or they would lie to exit pollers to tell them, hey, I voted for him, but I actually voted for her. And so that threw the numbers off and the algorithms went off. And then that's why 16 was so off. So that's a sample of how that works. And they do that in a way that's an algorithm, and every single poll is different. You have likely voters and you have registered voters. Likely voters is a much more difficult thing to get because you have to figure out who's your likely voter. And I'm going to talk about a concept called the monster vote a little bit later. Okay, so let's dig into some of these polls. Right here on the screen is a picture of the polling data, the aggregate data from the Real Clear Politics. And Real Clear Politics is a website. It aggregates things together. It takes multiple polls together and it gives you a score. And so here you see the top line, the RCP average says Biden is up 9.8 points. And so what you need to do for these polls particularly is to look at the crosstabs or the internals. It's the methodology that the poll used to come up with the data. It tells you typically sample sizes and whatever. But some things just are hidden. You got to kind of do your own research there. But if the samples are in there, you can kind of determine what's happening. And so if you want to look at the YouGov poll here, the third line, which has Biden up 9, that was the gold standard for 2018 and 2016 in terms of accuracy. And so let's take a look at that one. So here you see the crosstabs here. And if you come into the relationship between Joe Biden, so right now he has 39% with independents. And what I'm going to show you here, and this is what Red Eagle Politics did, he took all of the polling data and weighted them across party lines so that it would be more in tune with a better sample. Because again, those assumptions are based on turnout. And if you look at the primaries, Republicans had record turnouts this year in the primaries. They had the same thing going on in 2016, which is why we knew that Trump was going to win or be really competitive, because the turnout for the primaries in 2016 for Democrats wasn't that great. There's a little bit of uptick this time around for Democrats, but Republicans also had a huge uptick in turnout for the primaries. That's a very good indicator. So right here, we have that the indicator for Biden is that he's at 39% for independents, and Trump is at 41% for independents. Now, independents are really interesting because independents are typically your swing area. That's the area where people basically are looking for results. Independents typically are not ideologues. They want to know, are you getting the work done? Okay. They don't care about the party stuff. This is a good number. Trump is up 2 points for independents of a very accurate poll. And I would say he's even higher than this. But this poll here actually has the race pretty much even if you weight it. Let's look at that. Okay, so let's go back to this poll here. Here it has Biden, The Economist YouGov, +8. But when you weight that, it actually has Biden plus 0.3. And so that's a huge difference. And that's not including other factors I'm going to tell you about later. For the New York Times poll, we can consider this an outlier because it has a low independent score. Independents are going to show up for this election. So that was a miss sample there. So we can kind of throw that one out. The Emerson poll, weighted by party ID, has Biden at 47.3 and Trump at 43.3, giving Biden a +4 lead. The NPR poll, weighted properly, has Biden at a +5.3, down from a 7. The CNN poll also is an outlier because it has independents too low. Fox poll, too low. And if you look at the Quinnipiac poll, which is typically a very liberal poll, that has Biden winning at about 3% in terms of his party affiliation. So suddenly these numbers don't seem so startling, but that's not all there is to it. Let's take a look at this. So this is what the media is not telling you. This is what the pollsters are not telling you. It's that Biden's having a hard time winning the black vote. Now, in one poll, I'll show you in a second here, it had him at 81% black vote and it had Trump at 8%, which is what he got in 2016. But the key thing is the low number of black people that are polling for Biden. It doesn't matter if he gets a majority. He needs to get a lot in turnout for that to make up for that. It's key for him to win states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Very key states for Trump. Check out a video I have right above here, which will show you what would happen if Trump got a higher black turnout rate. Just 3 weeks ago, he had 41% approval on Rasmussen. He's looking anywhere from 8 to 10% polling right now if you look at these aggregate polls. And so right here it has whites 50% for Trump, 43.8 for Biden, which is typical. Most white people go for the conservatives, and blacks at 9.6% for Trump and 82.4% for Biden. I'm seeing that same range, anywhere from 8 to 10 on that. And Hispanics 33.5 for Trump, 57.3 for Biden. Again, that's a good safe number for Trump. In my opinion, if Trump gets this on election day, he wins hands down. He wins hands down. If he gets this number on election day, he's going to win Minnesota, he's going to win Pennsylvania, and he's going to keep Georgia, and that's going to be enough. And he'll keep Arizona, and that'll be enough for him to win the election. Simple as that. What they also aren't telling you is that Biden's having a hard time getting turnout in general. So back on June 18th, the Q poll, which again is a very liberal poll, has Biden at 49% and Trump at 41% plus 8. And so the Q poll, being as liberal as it is, you can pretty much add 7 to 8 points to that. So Red Eagle saying basically the election is tied. This came out yesterday from the primaries, where in Kentucky, Biden only won 57% of the Democrat votes. And they're telling us at that kind of participation, he's going to beat Trump by 10 points across the board. I don't think so. Not with that. I'm not saying he won't win, but these numbers are wrong. And this is as clear as day here. And what we're seeing in these polling and the metrics just don't make sense. And you don't fall in line with the crosstabs and the internals of the polls. It's the same thing we're seeing in 2016 of D plus 7, D plus 8, D plus 9, meaning oversampling Democrats by 8, 9, even 10% in 2016. That same thing is happening right now. Now they're taking independents and desampling them because they were onto their tricks. So they're taking independents and either getting independents who are liberal, or they're just underdoing or undersampling the independents in general, because independents typically go for the conservative, in this case Trump. And Trump is doing well with independents, and he's always done well with independents. The Fox News poll showed Trump winning independents at 17%. That's absolutely ridiculous. Here it says Walter Mondale got 36% of independents, and even John McCain got pretty much even with independents against Obama and still got shellacked across the country. So 17% is a total outlier, should be thrown out, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So for the buck out of state, if you adjust for the Q poll, you got Trump weighted at 48.6 to Biden's 44.2, again an oversampling of Democrats. So this poll comes to us from the Trafalgar Group, which according to Red Eagle was the most accurate pollster in 16 and 18, has Michigan basically a dead heat. That's bad news for Democrats because there's so much more to go. And also yesterday and Tuesday, we had the election of New York 27, where we had a person who was not endorsed by Trump, but was a Trump supporter, a MAGA. He won the primary by more than 30 points of what it was last time. This is big news. You're talking about a red seat that was outperforming by 30% only 2 years later. So again, we talked about this. This is the YouGov poll where it had Biden plus 8. But when you weight that poll properly, Biden only leads by 5.3, which is around the margin of error. And so on the national stage, we're not going to see a lot of shifting between Democrats and Republicans. We're going to see the same thing we saw in 2016. It's going to come down to two things: independence and turnout. That's what's going to come down to. And I'm pretty sure the Trump supporter is going to come out and vote. And if turnout is high, that may even benefit Trump even more, because the enthusiasm gap is still huge on Trump's side. So one more thing I want to talk about here on this in terms of metrics and polling data. This is something that was brought to my attention a few weeks ago. This is Pew Research. This is people who did not vote. So right now you see this left column here, this left circle, 52% white. These are people by race who did not vote. So of the people who did not vote, 52% were white. That's key because that's a big area of focus for the Trump campaign. If they go after this particular group, this could be a huge untapped voting base. And to the right here, we have 51% of people who didn't go to college are non-voters, which means these two sections, non-voters who are white and non-voters with high school or less, are above 50%. And if these people show up in any portion whatsoever, that's basically icing on the top, because they're going to vote for Trump based on all demographic metrics that are out there. So something to think about, and I'm hoping the Trump campaign knows this and are going after this. Now is a good time to talk about something called the monster vote. It's also called the hidden vote. It's also called the silent majority. And I mentioned it before. It's basically the voter that doesn't want to talk to pollsters, and it's a very difficult number to find. We talked about oversampling, how pollsters make assumptions and say, I'm going to think that 80% of people who come out are Democrats, so I'm only going to poll 80% Democrats. So guess what the poll is going to look like? It's going to be a Biden poll. If you assume that 80% of people are going to vote for Trump, then how's the poll going to look? Because you're only going to poll people who are Trump supporters. But here's the thing. Even if they assume that, they can't find the Trump voter, because the Trump voter A lot of these are first-time voters or blue dog Democrats who are back in the day who were voting Democrat for whatever reason, but now voting for Trump, won't admit it. They're scared to death to be called racist. They don't trust the media, so they won't talk to him. So even if they wanted to be honest about these polls, they can't, because the Trump supporter, that monster vote, is a silent vote that's not going to be known until you see them on the day of election. Go back and look at the election turnout. Go look at the coverage of CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. See the shock right around 10:30 at night when they start seeing time after time these different areas coming in droves as returns were coming in, how they just didn't understand how the poll was off. That's why it was off. It was off because those people weren't talking to them. Simple as that. So we can't base ourselves on that, but that's going to still be there because there's no indication at all that Trump's base has gone away even the slightest. He had the highest GOP approval in history. I think it's up to 94%. He's incredible in terms of that. So there's no shock there, but people really can't quantifiably say, I think Trump's going to win, because on paper, they don't see it. And they won't see it until election day. But there are some trends that incumbent presidents enjoy. So this is from Breitbart. So it's time and time again, when a sitting president runs for office, his polling numbers jump. This is just a fact. When a president gets himself out of the White House, out behind the resolute desk to make his case, to appeal directly to voters in the real world, his standing always improves. There are no exceptions in modern presidency. Nixon jumped from the mid-50s to over 60% while running for re-election in 72. Carter, approval jumped by 10 points in the months before he lost to Reagan. Reagan jumped about 10 points in the months before he was sworn in for the second time in 85. H.W. Bush went from 30% to close out 50% in a matter of a few months before losing to Clinton. Clinton gained at least 10 points in the months before the 96 re-election, and down to the highs he hit after September 11th. W is something of an outlier, but the downward spiral that defined his two-term presidency bumps up nearly 10 points in late 2004. And Obama spiked nearly 10 points in the months leading up to his 2012 re-election. So with all of this going on, you can almost expect and see why Democrats don't want to reopen the country. You can see why they don't want to have conventions. You can see why they don't want to have voting. You won't see why they have people mailing in their ballots. You can see why they want to have a Biden locked in a dungeon to prevent campaigns. You can see why they want to keep Trump rallies down for this reason right here. So right now, the polls are just way too close if you weight them. Even if Biden is up 5.3, that is nothing when you bring in everything I just mentioned about everything else, the monster vote, the black vote, the presidential bump that he gets on re-election, the fact that they're oversampled by independents, and on and on and on. That 5.3 evaporates immediately. Now, Trump may or may not win the popular vote, but again, it has nothing to do with the popular vote. It has to do with winning the Electoral College. So let's go over some of these battleground states that people are wondering if he's going to win or not. All right, now let's look at the election map. I'm going to highlight the battleground states. I'm putting those guys in blue. And I'm going to, instead of going through all of these, I can do a different video. I'm only going to show you 3. I'm going to go off the ones that I feel that Trump needs to focus on the hardest. So I'm going to take off Nevada because that's going to be a tough one either way, even though he's doing fairly well there. I'm going to take off Florida because I feel he's going to win Florida pretty convincingly. I'm going to take off Michigan because, again, like Nevada, it's going to be really close either way. North Carolina, I don't see Trump losing North Carolina no matter what the polls say right now. Obama lost North Carolina to Romney, so that should tell you something there. And Pennsylvania, we're going to keep that, and we're going to take off Georgia because I think Trump will carry Georgia. So let's just focus on 3 states here: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona. For Trump to win Pennsylvania, he needs to make sure that he limits the gains in Philadelphia. He needs to make sure that he maxes out the West, which is right here, your coal miners, this area here. He's going to focus on energy independence for that very reason. And he wants to at least tackle central PA because there's an opportunity there as well. And with that, he can keep Pennsylvania red. In the state of Wisconsin, he's to go after the WOW areas, which is the southeast portion of Wisconsin. Very, very conservative. It's a very traditional conservative, establishment conservative area. Win those back over. Those are the guys that went for Mitt Romney. He needs to go after the bellwether of Kenosha, and he needs to make sure that any losses in southwest Wisconsin don't offset any gains he made in the WOW areas, which is the southeast portion of Wisconsin, and he can win Wisconsin again. And for Arizona, he needs to win Yuma County by a greater margin than he did in 2016. McSally was able to do this. He needs to max out Prescott County. He needs to get over 40% in Pima County. And for Maricopa County, he needs to make sure that his losses are under 40%. And he needs to focus on illegal immigration, talk about the wall, and that would be a good way to win and to keep Arizona. If he wins 2 of these states, he wins the election. It really comes down to that. That's his best path because he's already set a firewall across the board with what he did in 2016. Well, I know that was a lot of information. I hope it was helpful, and be excited. This is going to be a fun time. I believe strongly that Trump will win this election. Had it not been for all the COVID and the shutdowns, I would have been even more confident. But I think what will happen is things will pan out and it will work out. Trump will get his message out, and as Biden gets out on the campaign trail, he's his own worst enemy, and we will see another 4 years of President Trump. I truly believe that. If not, I will come back and I will tell you. Check out Red Eagle Politics and Bill Mitchell. Those guys provided the data for this. I just presented it in a way that made sense to me, and hopefully it makes sense to you. So thank them for that. Go to their channel and check them out. And if you like what we do here at The Conservative Take, where we take culture, TV, and movies and filter it right, please click that like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And please share with your friends as we are trying to reach 10,000 subscribers. And as always, please check out some content that we have right here.